Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Daniel's son. I hope everybody's well out there. I hope everybody's doing well today. And before I get started, before I say anything else, as most of y'all already know anyway, this is not going to be a fragrance review. I wanted to say that up front. This really isn't going to have anything to do with fragrances. Maybe a little bit towards the end, but I've been meaning to do this for quite a while now, and I've actually mentioned it before in a couple of my other reviews that I wanted to do a video and me talk about my depression, my PTSD, and my being an introvert, social anxiety, and all that type of stuff. And I tried to do that a few times. I tried to do a video of that a few times, and it didn't work because it was a few times that I would end up getting upset talking about certain things, and I would start getting emotional, and then a couple of times I would have so many thoughts in my head that I would forget to mention certain things that I knew was really important. And I almost gave up doing it, but today I woke up and I was like, I just need to go ahead and do this. Don't plan it, just grab your phone and start talking. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I said a little prayer before this, because I am a little bit nervous talking about this. I don't know how people are going to react to this. There's a couple of things that I thought about also before I actually started this video. Some of the stuff is very sensitive, what I'm going to talk about. I decided to leave out a couple of things, but there's a couple of things that happened to me that I was going to mention my whole history. And I think mentioning some of the stuff that happened to me when I was a little kid is going to be inappropriate. So I'm not going to mention a couple of things. But there is a couple of things that's going to be very uncomfortable for me to talk about and for certain people out there to hear. But I am going to talk about certain things, even though it's going to be uncomfortable. But I think it's very relevant, and I think it's very important for this whole story that I'm going to tell. So if I do make anybody uncomfortable out there, I apologize. But if I'm going to do this, there is certain things that I'm going to have to say that's going to be uncomfortable. And I guess the best place for me to get started is my background. I was born in 1963. I was born in Western North Carolina. From my earliest from the earliest things I can remember about myself is I always knew I was different. I always knew that I was a lot different from everybody else. Even as a child, I was an introvert. I had social anxiety. It seemed like I acted differently than everybody else. It seems like I thought differently than everybody else. It seemed like everything about me was different, almost like I was like not even a human in a way, which was very hard on me. I never felt like I fit in the human race whatsoever. there's a couple of things that happened to me when I was real little, a couple of different occasions, and that's the part that I'm not going to go into detail about because I just don't think it's appropriate. A couple of things that happened to me really messed me up in my head. And that amplified my anxiety and that brought on PTSD. That made me more of an introvert, and it increased my social anxiety to the extreme. I ended up getting severe depression, severe PTSD. I mean, as a kid, um, I was immediately taken to psychiatrists and psychologists. And of course, immediately they put me on all kinds of drugs. Even when I was a little kid, I was on like massive amounts of antidepressants, and um, which never did help. Um, Not long after that, even though it was already really uncomfortable for me being in this world, I began to hate this world even more. I hated everybody. I hated the world. I hated school. School was horrible. Every single second of every day that I went was horrible for me because of my social anxiety, and um, now that I have bad depression and PTSD, and it just made everything 100 times worse. Massive amounts of antidepressants and seeing strange people asking me all kinds of questions all the time. And one thing I want to mention that is uncomfortable, but I want to go ahead and say it because I think it's irrelevant to my story, is I can't remember how old I was. I must have been like 11, 12. And I have no idea how I even knew what suicide was, or, you know, how I knew that cutting your wrist would kill you. I guess I might have seen it on TV or something. I don't know. But I remember one day after school when I was real little that I was so depressed and I hated this world so bad and I didn't want to be here that I went to a drawer in the kitchen and picked up the sharpest knife I could. And I could remember like this was last week. This is how clear it is in my head. I got some kind of butcher knife or a really sharp steak knife, and I held it up to my wrist. And I was thinking to myself, this could solve my problems, but I don't know how bad it's going to hurt. All these thoughts come into my head. What if I do this and I don't kill myself? Am I going to get spanked? You know, people are going to be mad at me because I got blood all over the kitchen. These are the thoughts that were in my head. So I decided not to do that. Eventually, somehow, I started cutting myself and I started burning myself. I'm not really sure why I did that, but it was just, I guess it was torturing myself, I guess. But I started cutting myself, I started burning myself, and I made sure that I did it where nobody could see it. Of course, eventually they did see it, and that made even more drugs and more visits to the psychiatrist. And, fast forward to 1983, I, I become an alcoholic. Um, Probably when I was like 13. My dad was an alcoholic. Um, I started drinking his liquor, his whiskeys when I was like 13. I would sneak it every day. I became an alcoholic at 13. So by the time I was married, I was a full-blown alcoholic. Of course, my first marriage didn't last because I was an alcoholic and we both were young and we didn't know anything. So that ended up in divorce, which made me drink and do drugs even more. Depression more. Several years later, I got married again. I don't know why. It ended up in divorce after a few years. A lot of it was my fault because alcoholism, depression, I didn't love her. I don't think she loved me, really. It was just something to do. That made everything worse still. Fast forward to 2014. I was a mess. I started cutting myself again. My whole body was like bloody scars. I was burning myself again. I hated my life. I hated life. I hated the world. I hated everybody in the world. Extreme depression. Every second of my life was pain and suffering. One thing, I'm going off track a little bit. I wasn't necessary. I wouldn't call myself a Christian my whole life, but I knew at a real early age. I knew that God did exist. And I knew this throughout all the stuff that happened when I was a kid. And I knew it throughout my adult life, my marriages and alcoholism stuff. I sort of knew that in the back of my head, but I kept it in the back of my head because I was too busy suffering to find out anything about God. And another thing, if there was God, I've heard a lot of people say this, if there was a God, he wouldn't be letting this happen to me. I've heard that a lot, and I've said that before. We'll get to that later. But fast forward to 2014 June, I was in such a depressed state, and I had, how old was I in 2014? 50-ish, I don't know, late 40s. I had 40-something years of extreme depression and suffering, and I was just like, something, this is it. I've had it. I went ahead and made plans to kill myself. Wow. I quit work. I started drinking way more heavier than I ever have in my entire life. I was drinking a minimum of a 12-pack and a fifth of vodka a day. That was minimum. Usually it was more like a 24-pack and 2 or 3/5 a day. I quit my job. I just stopped going. I didn't call them or anything. I just stopped going. Because it didn't matter. Nothing mattered because I was going to I wasn't going to be here in a few days anyway, so why do I care? So I concentrated on doing nothing but drugs and alcohol. And the whole time, for several days, I was already planning. I picked a day out to not suffer anymore, to kill myself. I picked out a day and I was like, it gave me time to think about how I was going to do it, what I was going to do. And the whole time I was getting more excited and more happy because I knew before long I was not going to suffer anymore. Man, oh man. I was like trying to think of different ways. I was like, one thing I remember I thought was I could get my car, I could fill it up with gas, I could get on the interstate, I could get my car up to the highest speed it could possibly go and run into a building. And another way was, for a split second I thought of hanging. I was like, no, that I don't want to do that because I don't know anything about it. And I decided on overdose. So what I did was go ahead and put in another order for, I was taking trazodone. I was taking all kinds of crap. I was taking so much antidepressants that didn't help. I was taking trazodone for an antidepressant to help me sleep. I had extremely high blood pressure because of my health. I had, I got another prescription for a full bottle of lisinopril, which is high blood pressure medicine. And I knew that that was going to, if I took enough, it was going to stop my heart. So I was drinking massive amounts of alcohol to get numb. And I didn't sleep for, I know I didn't sleep for 3 days preparing for this. And I was just so out of it. Anyway, there's no way I could have slept. So I was like, what I'll do is, I had a full bottle of trazodone. I'll take that first. Trazodone will knock me out. Then I'll take a full bottle of lisinopril. Both are maximum doses. You can't go any higher dose than that. So I took handfuls. I think I counted out like, it was like 45 or 47 100 milligram trazodones. I ate those with about a fifth of liquor. I decided to wait. I wanted that to go ahead and get in my system. Wow. I wanted that to go ahead and get in my system, and by the time I took the lisinopril, I would be like passing out. So if I had a heart attack, I wouldn't feel anything or whatever it did. So I took 45, 47, 100 milligram trazodones, waited about 30 minutes, and then I took 65 lisinopril. And I knew that that was going to stop my heart, but I would probably pass out first. And I also thought that after I took the lisinopril, I was going to wait as long as I could to call anybody, because this is me. This is my mind. I thought about dying in my apartment. I lived by myself in my apartment. I was like, you know something, I don't want to end up dying in my apartment, because I was surrounded by other apartments. People lived next door and up above me and stuff. I was like, well, if I die, in like a week, my body's going to start smelling, and that would be, I was concerned about my neighbors, believe it or not. So I was like, I'll wait a couple hours, as long as I can, until I knew that I was dying, and then I would call the non-emergency police and have them to come, and by the time they come, I would be dead. They would pick up my body out of my apartment and then go I would be buried. Ooh, man, oh man, oh man. So that's what I did. I waited until I felt like I was probably getting ready to die, because I started like blacking out a little bit and I felt my insides not right. My heart wasn't right and I knew it. So I made the call. I was like, could you have somebody come and pick me up, because I'm probably going to be dead in a few minutes and I don't want to die in my apartment. And I hung up the phone. And of course, a few minutes, there was about 100 police in my apartment, and along with the emergency medical technicians, and they picked me up and threw me in the ambulance, and they immediately started working on me. And I figured I would be dead by then, but I was like, give it a few more minutes. Of course, they tore my clothes off. They put monitors on me, and I think they knew that my heart was not right. So they started working on me. Got to the emergency room. There were about 10 or 15 doctors and about 100 nurses waiting on me. Threw me in bed, tore off the rest of my clothes, started to pump me full of all different kinds of stuff. And I was starting to get pissed off because I wasn't dead yet. I was exhilarated for the last 5 days because I knew I was going to die, and I'm in the hospital and they're working on me and I'm not dead yet, and I'm very pissed off about that. But I did come really close, because I was listening to all the doctors around me, and apparently my heart was getting ready to stop. I was getting ready to die. But I never did pass out. I never did pass out or anything. They had me in there for overnight, and they escorted me to ICU, and I was in ICU for quite a while. They thought I was actually going to die from organ failure. They thought all those drugs that I took and all the alcohol and stuff, I was end up, having organ failure. So I was in ICU for a long time, under guard by the police and security. But I never did die. I never did pass out or anything. After a few days, the police come and they escorted me next door. The hospital had a building right next to it that was called the Institute of Psychiatry. And they took me over there. I didn't have any property or anything, just clothes on my back. But they took those and gave me some pajamas, and they committed me in there under 24-hour surveillance. And I was actually in there for over a month. Usually, I heard that most people, even after trying to commit suicide, you're in there no longer than 2 weeks, but I was in there for over 4, I guess, because I was still thinking about it, But eventually I started lying. I had to see, there was a psychiatrist and psychologist come in to see me like a few times every single day. And, the last week I just started to lie to them and tell them that I felt so much better and how sorry I was, that I would try to do anything like that. So the whole thing was a lie. And I was telling them I can't wait to get back home so I could start my life over. All lies. But eventually they set a date to let me out, but they wouldn't let me go home because I think they sort of knew. So the day came, and um, they put me in a police car, and they escorted me to a facility, a recovery home. And after I got there, I was under house arrest for about 2 weeks. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere on my own, and if I did go out of the premises, I had to be with two other people. And I think that sort of started my journey. I think actually ICU started my journey to my new life, to where I ended up right now talking to y'all. But eventually, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I wasn't allowed to drink or anything. They would give me like drug tests every day, so I didn't do any drugs. I eventually got my head fairly straight, and started feeling better, even though suicide was still in my head. But eventually, I got better, and the head people in this facility thought that I would be a good counselor and a good house manager of this place. So they offered it to me after several months, and I ended up taking it as, the counselor house manager job. And I would take care of the people that would come in from the hospital that tried to commit suicide, for drug addiction, for alcoholism, support, all this stuff. I actually became one of the people in charge there, and I think I knew then that I started just to realize that I actually had a purpose in life, and there's no better person to help people like that than a person that's actually gone through that. So I actually started doing that for quite a while, but after a couple years, I ended up leaving the place and going out on my own and seeking truth and wisdom, because I knew there's a reason I didn't die. In the hospital, when I was in ICU, doctors and nurses would come in all the time, and they was like, you shouldn't be alive, because what you did, there's no way you should have survived that. So that got me thinking that God intervened, and he didn't want me to die. And it took me years to really think about, I am special and unique, and I'm supposed to be in this world to help people. And I came to realize that, I even said this, they made me go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and there was a few times they asked me to speak in meetings and give my testimony. I think a lot of people got what I said, and a lot of people didn't, but one thing that I said was, the best thing that ever happened to me was the worst things that happened to me. Things that happened to me when I was a little kid, my alcoholism, everything, my whole entire life, I was so grateful for, because all those bad things helped me to be the person I am right now, and in the position I'm in right now. It was part of my path. So I'm grateful for all those things that happened. Things that happened to me when I was a kid. My alcoholism, my drug addiction, even cutting myself. I helped a lot of people that had cut themselves and burned themselves. And I understood what they were going through because I went through it. Fast forward to now. I had a very interesting life. I've had a journey. I was on a journey. My life was a journey. Over the last few years, I've developed things that would help me with my depression, my anxiety, my social anxiety, me being an introvert, and that's the main reason of this video. And I'm sorry it's taken so long, but I can't worry about the time. I need to tell my story. There's 3 categories that I work on constantly every day to keep me from getting to a state of depression and anxiety. It helped me deal with my PTSD, which I still have to a certain extent. The 3 categories are things I work on physically, mentally, and spiritually. And I want to talk about the physical part first. To help me with depression and all this stuff, everything. One of the main things is what I put in my body. I used to be fat. I used to be so sick. I used to have my blood pressure was sky high for years and years and years. I had horrible diabetes to where I would have to inject insulin. I was just horrible. My skin was bad. That contributes to depression. That is no good. If you do not want depression, being fat and unhealthy and sick will help you retain depression. So what I put in my body, I've lost so much weight. I'm down to my ideal weight. Eventually, when I was first diagnosed with high blood pressure and diabetes, they said you will be on medication for your entire life. There's nothing you can do about it, so you have to be on medication the rest of your life. Bull crap. Within 6 months of me going from a meat, dairy, crap diet, one day I decided to go to a plant-based diet because of a friend that I met that helped me with that, to make that decision. But I went from pure meat and pure dairy and pure garbage to vegetables, fruits, nuts, beans, legumes, plant-based diet. Within 6 months, I'd lost 20 or 30 pounds. My blood sugar stabilized, so they took me off of diabetes medication. My blood pressure is perfect, and it's been perfect for years. They took me off on all drugs. I weaned myself off of antidepressants too, because I was on antidepressants my entire life, and they never did anything except hurt me. I might make a separate video for that, antidepressants and what I think of them. But I do not believe in antidepressants. I do not. I think there's a very, very small majority of people that have something physically wrong with them that antidepressants do help. But 85-90% of the people that are on antidepressants that has depression does not need any kind of medication. I do not believe that. And hopefully if you were on antidepressants with depression and anxiety and stuff, that's one reason I'm mentioning these things, is because I think a lot of people are on that crap and don't need it. But a plant-based diet has changed my entire life. It has helped me physically. It's helped me mentally. I can think clear now because I'm so healthy now. As a matter of fact, I'm 56, and next year, Charleston. I live in Charleston. I'm actually going to run a marathon next year because I'm in such good shape and I know I can do it. First time, and I'm 56 years old. Exercise, I think, is very important. Get off your butt, stop watching TV, get up and go for walks. Get some fresh air. That always helps me. Another thing is me staying clean all the time. When I was like, mentally sick and physically sick, there would be like days I would skip taking a shower, and that would make everything so much worse, not being clean. So actually keeping yourself clean and healthy actually helps with depression, helps keep depression away. Another category is the mental part, which I think is very important. One of the things that I do to keep me from getting depression and anxiety is being around animals. I'm like one of the biggest animal lovers in the entire world. One thing that helps me more than anything, much better than any antidepressant, is being around animals and taking care of them. Sometimes I'll volunteer at like an animal shelter or something, and I'm excited about going there. When I'm there, I'm so happy. When I leave, I'm so happy. I don't think about depression or anything bad as long as I'm around animals. So animals, if you're an animal lover, that's something to think about. I do a lot of reading and research now that I can think, and then I'm not spending all my time in front of the TV and drinking and smoking and stuff. I can read now and I can concentrate better. That's fun for me. I do a lot of research. Learning to love yourself, which part of the spiritual part has a lot to do with learning how to love yourself. Did you know everyone that is listening to this right now is a very unique, special individual? Because God didn't make a person and then make a carbon copy of that person. He made everybody unique, unlike anybody else, and very, very special. And I think that's where I got that when I was a kid, that I always knew that I was unique and different and special than anybody else. Everybody actually is. Even you, the person that's listening right now, nobody else is like you. You're very unique and special. Another thing is I've always done, but I especially do now, is stay away from dramatic people. I stay away from gossip as much as I can, which being an introvert helps that. But keep away from negativity. That will help with depression. Stay positive. Stay around positive people. Another thing that a lot of people might be surprised that I'm going to mention is something that helps me with anxiety and depression and PTSD. Actually, let me go grab something. I didn't even think about grabbing it. I'll be right back. Fragrances. Fragrances help me with depression and anxiety. A few years ago, I would never thought about fragrances being able to help somebody with depression and their emotions and stuff, but I've learned over the last year and a half that me being a fragrance enthusiast, has helped me deal with certain kinds of depression and anxiety, and it helps me after I get home from work, after being around so many people. With me being an introvert, I can get home and close my door and be by myself and either, like I like to say, experience a fragrance. Because the sense of smell is extremely important to me, and I think really important to a lot of people. But certain kinds of fragrances can help me relax. And actually incense, I like to burn a lot of incense. Fragrances help me with depression and stuff. Either burning incense or coming home and taking a shower and getting clean and putting on a fragrance will help me relax. And I close my eyes and just sort of meditate and breathe in a beautiful smell, and that helps me so much. And another category I wanted to talk about is my spiritual health, which I think, well, I don't think the spiritual side of this, being spiritual healthy, is by far the most important thing that I'm going to talk about on this video, and that is my faith. God has revealed himself to me over and over and over throughout my entire life, and he revealed himself to me when I was a child, and I knew that, but I sort of ignored it. Well, not really ignored it. I was going through too much stuff to know how to get out of that and go to him, or let him come to me, I should say. I didn't know how, because I was going through so much my entire life. But my faith, I've learned that God, my Father, if you ever hear me say my Father, I am talking about God. I know that he's there, and I know he's here all the time, everywhere. So I know that, and I know he's there for me, and I can go to him anytime with anything. It's just up to me when he gives me free will. He gives everybody free will, so I know he's there whenever I need him. So it's faith. And another thing, that this is the most material thing in my entire life, the most important material thing in the entire world, and that's my Bibles. I have many Bibles. I've given many Bibles away. I look at the Bible as it's his words. It's the book of life. I call it a lot of different things. The book of life. It's the book of love. The book of answers. All answers. And the book of hope. I used to think the Bible is a judgment. Like you have to do this or you're going to hell. Or you can't do this. I used to look at it like that. I don't look at it that way anymore. I look at it opposite now. I look at it as pure love. That's what the Bible is. A book of pure love, pure hope, and answers to anything and everything. So those two are the most important things that I could ever possibly say in my relationship with my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because I know what he has done for me to keep me from suffering now, and all that is in here. So those are the things that I wanted to talk about, that maybe you could try if you have depression or anxiety or anything like that. Hmm. I'm going to leave my fragrance, my personal Facebook page in the description, just in case anybody has any questions for me. You know, there's a way to get in contact with me. If you want to ask me any questions or want to talk about anything, just comment down in the comment section, or either look in the description, and you know, that'll be a link to my personal Facebook page. So that's my story, and that's how I ended up here talking about this and making this video. It was a wild journey to get to where I'm at this very instant, but I'm finally happy, and I didn't have to kill myself to do it. Anyway, that's all I have to say. It's almost 50 minutes. I'm sorry, but this is something that I needed to do and have to do. This is one reason I'm here. It's one reason I survived. I love you guys. And, man. I'll talk to y'all later. Love you. Bye.